Welcome to Sweden's third Global Food System Dialogue. This dialogue will focus on Action Track 3, Boost Nature Positive Food Production. And it's arranged by the Swedish Ministry of Enterprise and Innovation, the Swedish International Development Agency, Sida, SIANI, Focali, SLU Global and AgriFosea 2030. My name is Maria Ölund and I'm the project manager of the Focali Research Network and the Focali-SIANI collaboration. I am the curator of this dialogue. The Food System Summit will be held in September to discuss the much needed food system transformation. In the process leading up to the Food System Summit, all UN member states have been invited to hold national dialogues in the preparations for the summit. You can read about Sweden's already held national, 2 regional and 2 global dialogues on the SIANI and government web pages via links that will be available in the chat. This series of Sweden's global dialogues have several aims. First of all, to open up for input to the Swedish preparations ahead of the summit, but also for broader input to the Swedish government offices' continued work on food systems, as well as input to Swedish International Development Cooperation. We thus really encourage you to take part in the group workshop today after this opening session. This is an opportunity to raise your perspectives and knowledge on ways forward. The global food systems of today are, as we know, not sustainable for people and the planet. As the ongoing pandemic really underlines, we need a holistic approach on the interlinked challenges of our time. We are in the midst of a coupled health, socioeconomic, food insecurity, inequality, biodiversity, and climate crisis. And food systems are contributing to these challenges as well as provide opportunity for broad action on these linked issues. Urgent action is needed to realize the human right to food, at the same time sustainably manage food production systems, protect ecosystems and biodiversity, and rehabilitate degraded land and seascapes. And this is what we will discuss here today. The main reason why we are here is to listen to you and to gather your input on these challenges. We have participants calling in from around the world, and we are so honored to have you all here. All should feel that you have something to contribute with. We all interact with food systems in one way or another, and we can all contribute in different ways. A warm welcome to all of you. This opening session is short and there will not be time to pose questions to the speakers, but feel free to ask questions in the chat and also discuss with each other and share information there related to the theme of the event and what you do and your related publications. During the opening session, we will in 2 panels hear from inspirational speakers that will give us some food for thought from different contexts and sectors. And after this first hour introduction, you will be sent out into groups with about 10 participants. A facilitator in each group will make sure that you all get a chance to speak, and a note taker will collect your input. All groups will have the vision statement that you received when you signed up as a starting point for the discussion. We have a great and big team behind the scenes that will make this all work. During the group workshop, you will also be given a 15-minute break to take a leg stretch, fetch some coffee. And after the group discussion, you will be sent back here to this plenary for reporting back from what you discussed in the groups. We will have a concluding remark by Esther Nilsson, Senior Policy Specialist for Agriculture and Food Security at Sida, at the very end. So I hope you all stayed. I will explain more about the workshop later in the program. But now it is time to introduce you to our opening speaker, Maria Milivojevic, Deputy Director, Secretariat for EU and International Affairs at the Ministry of Enterprise and Innovation in Sweden, that is co-organizing this dialogue series with us. And Maria is responsible for the Swedish dialogue with FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. This is usually her focus, but currently she is in addition working with the Swedish preparations ahead of the Food System Summit. Maria will outline a bit more about the process we are in, and after this she will be available to answer questions in the chat. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Maria. Many Marias here. Thank you so much for allowing me to begin this final dialogue. It's actually the last of 7 dialogues that we've had, like you mentioned. We had a national one, we had 2 regional ones, and then 4 thematic, one on social sustainability, and the 3 global ones that where we are now, the final one on action track 3. So I've been asked to tell you a little bit about the process and what we're going to do next. But first, I wanted to inform you that our dialogues is a part of a global movement. There have been about 100 national dialogues already, and about 240 independent dialogues, and there are more to come, and this is across 60 countries. So I would say that this part of the preparation for the Food System Summit has truly become a success, and Sweden is really in the forefront. We've managed to do our entire dialogue series already, although a lot of our colleagues, mainly in Europe, are just starting. So very, very proud about that. I think this is a very big success from a democratic point of view, to really have these kind of dialogues to talk to everyone. We are currently in the process of analyzing and translating also the reports from the first dialogues, and we will shortly receive also the reports from the global dialogues that have been held with the help of SIANI, Focali, Sida, SLU, etc. So we really are in the middle of this process, but generally we can say that the level of knowledge is really very high. There are a lot of initiatives going on, but something that has transpired through all of these dialogues is that there is a need for a joint goal and better coordination. So there are many, many initiatives going on, but everyone is asking for is, what is the joint goal ahead, so that we can kind of add to this. So this is something that we really need to consider and think about in the government offices, how we can provide help with this. So what is this all going to lead to? Well, Maria was already mentioning a few things, but one of the first things is, of course, the actual dialogues. They are very much a part of the preparation of the summit, but also a result in itself. And it seems that it's going to be quite a success. And I just received this morning, just before the meeting, the first synthesis report of the first round of dialogues that the Dialogue Secretariat has produced. So I would be very happy to, I haven't read it because I just got it, but I will be happy to provide the link in the chat for everyone to read. So that is the synthesis from I think it was about 8 countries that had done the dialogues quite early on. And this will all feed into the Summit Secretariat, of course, and to the work in finding the solutions and seeing where the issues are. Then, of course, we are going to make a pathway, as they call it, the pathway to a sustainable food system in Sweden. Now, this document is going to be a short one. The instructions are that it's going to be about 5 pages long. So as you understand, this will only be kind of a flavor of what has happened throughout these dialogues and what we are going to do. But this will also feed into the Secretariat, of course. So the main work from our point, from the government offices and from all of you, of course, is to feed this, all of this information, all of this input that we've got into the different processes where they belong. So that could be in the budget process, it could be the food strategy, it could be our international strategies. We will have to find where they fit, because this is a process, and I really want to underline that the summit is a stepping stone, and this work will continue, and it is a way to contribute to Agenda 2030, so it will be a part of that process for sure. We will take care of this input in different processes. So finally, I want to just conclude that we are really in the middle of working with this matter that we have received. We try to update the government webpage continuously, so you are welcome to look there for new information. This synthesis report that I mentioned will certainly be there. All the links to the dialogues will be there, and all the reports, of course. And as soon as we have the pathway finished, that will also be uploaded to this homepage. And of course, the Food System Dialogue homepage as well. So I think you will get the links maybe at the end of the seminar, otherwise we can provide them in the chat. And finally, before I stop, I just wanted to mention also that some of the ideas that we are working with on our contribution to the Food System Summit. Now, remembering that the dialogues have a more internal focus, they are focused on what we can do as Sweden, deciding on our own, so to speak, while then there are other processes that we have to do in collaboration with other countries or UN organizations that have a more global scope. And there we are currently looking at school feeding programs. There is a coalition along with Finland and Iceland and France and a few more countries looking at how we can use food in school as a good stepping stone for better food systems. We're looking at food losses and waste. We're quite good at follow-up in Sweden, indicators and so on. So that is also something we are looking at. And of course, working on AMR, we want to highlight that towards the summit. So those are some of the areas that we are looking at collaborating with other countries or UN organizations to move things ahead. So with that, I think my time is up, and I want to wish you all a really productive dialogue. I will be available for some questions in the chat, and I look forward to this day and to the result of this final dialogue. So good luck to you all, and have a nice morning session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Maria, and also for clarifying this, that the input that you leave with us here today will be used in many different ways. The summit is one, but there are many processes going on. So with that, we will now turn to a video greeting from a Swede in the world. Ulrika Moder, Assistant Secretary General and Director of Bureau of External Relations and Advocacy at the United Nations Development Program, UNDP, in New York. And she was previously the State Secretary to the Swedish Minister for International Development Cooperation, and she has rich experience from Swedish development organizations as her many years with Diakonia. And due to the time difference, she has shared a video that we will now take part of.
Thank you for inviting me to take part in Sweden's Global Food Systems Dialogue. And as we gather for this third dialogue session, it's really encouraging to see that there are more than 100 countries around the world holding similar events. And our organizers, the government offices of Sweden, Sida, SIANI, Focali, SLU, Global and Agroforestry 2030, you must be proud of the enthusiastic response. This third food systems dialogue focuses on how to achieve increased food security, protection of biodiversity, sustainable food production systems, and reforestation of degraded areas. Simultaneously, quite a challenge, but as our UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said, transforming food systems is crucial for delivering all of the Sustainable Development Goals. Food systems support progress towards at least 12 of the Sustainable Development Goals, including the basic goal of eliminating hunger and poverty. Food systems are also vital for mainstreaming the 3 Rio Conventions on biodiversity, climate change, and desertification. So focusing in on action track 3 of the Food System Summits, our aim is to boost nature-positive production at sufficient scale. What does that mean for Sweden? Well, let's look at deforestation, both at home and in the products we import. Deforestation is the second largest contributor to climate change, as you know, and when looking at tropical forests, 70% of the deforestation is linked to the production of agricultural commodities, including beef, soya, cacao, coffee, and palm oil. Globally, Sweden is also a leader in providing political, technical and financial support to countries to help transformation of food systems. And this includes initiatives facilitated by the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, Sida, and other Swedish institutions in collaboration with UNDP. For example, the global Sida UNDP program on environment and climate change. It's obvious that we must grab the opportunity that to come up with an integrated, joined-up approach to Agenda 2030. But it can't just be one event in September. We must continue to work beyond that. And the ideas of the summit comes up, then they will be refined into 12 priorities for collective action on food system transformation. Collaboration will be at the heart of that, and UNDP is in a unique position to bring multidimensional aspects of development and sectors together. UNDP's SDG integrator role, looking for integrated solution, and its newly launched food and agricultural commodity systems practice brings together projects in more than 100 countries and close to 500 landscapes. This is a network ready for transformation, ready to be used in partnership with Sweden. And we have learned that systems change must be approached at 3 levels: the whole system, the community system, and also at the individual level. Much effort is, as we know, devoted to transforming the systems level, often at a global scale, for example in supply chains. And the community level, for UN organizations, this means of course the work that we do with national and regional governments, but at the individual level there are still opportunities for improvement. And we see that if we work in an integrated way with these 3 levels, we can really make change happen. We need to bring the 3 levels into greater connection. Together with our core partners, we are ready to develop post-summit initiative, the future of food systems collaboration, to support countries and see to that they can build country dialogues. And in order to do that, we're offering our best practice solutions, our expertise, our multi-stakeholder collaborations for food systems change. We're making a long-term investment in the transformative change that we need to see at all these 3 different levels. So as you enjoy today's dialogue, do look forward to further dialogues in the future as we work to transform food systems together. Have a great event. Thank you for listening.
So thank you so much, Ulrika, for that. I know that you wanted to be here with us, but it's in the middle of the night for you. So with that, we will now dive into the first panel. And Agnes will share the names of those that will be speaking in the first panel, and I will introduce them one by one. And the first panel will focus on key challenges and the needed transformation of the global food system for people and planet. And we will start in this order by focusing on people first and listen to perspectives from some of the key stakeholders in the food systems, farmers. We are happy to present Estrella Penunia, Secretary General, Asian Farmers Association for Sustainable Rural Development, as our first speaker. AFA is a regional farmers organization, and correct me if I'm wrong on the numbers, but with around 13 million family farmers as members engaged in crops, livestock, fisheries, forestry, herding, and pastoralism. And Estrella will present some of the key challenges for farmers she works with and key perspectives of importance for them for more sustainable food systems. Welcome, the floor is yours. We're happy to have you.
And we thank the organizers from Sweden for inviting us to this independent dialogue. Next slide, please. The dialogue on food system are very important to us. It is because we believe that family farmers are at the center and at the heart of the food system. Globally and in the Asia-Pacific region, family farmers produce 70 to 80% of the world's foods, and a very large majority, at most 80% in Asia-Pacific, are small-scale farmers working on an average 2 hectares of land. Through our associations, commodity groups, and cooperatives, we are able to aggregate our members' produce, process the produce to add shelf life and value to our products, market our surplus or cash crops for domestic and sometimes international markets. We are also consumers, as we seldom produce everything we need, or we can produce only enough for some months. We also cook and prepare food. In fact, we have prepared so many local food which have been innovated and fused by some entrepreneurial chefs. And in all our farming activities, we generate waste and take initiatives to reduce and recycle waste in our farms and homes and facilities. That is why we say family, can you go back to the first slide, the previous slide? That is why we say family farmers are at the center and at the heart of the food system, because family farmers have a role, a contribution in each element. And that is why we say nothing about us without us, because family farmers comprise from at least 30% to as much as 70% of the population in many countries. Next slide, please. However, the current food system, which is highly industrialized and dominated by big business and capitalists, it's very much broken. It is a system that results to 1.4 billion poor, mostly and hungry, mostly small-scale food producers and family farmers. It is a system that results to biodiversity loss and ecosystem degradation, and where the youth is not attracted to agriculture. Here are our key challenges. Lack of tenurial rights over our lands, waters, forests, resources, threatening the livelihoods of 2.5 billion small-scale family farmers. Lack of access and control over technological, education, health, infrastructure, information, production, financial, and market resources. It is a testimony to the neglect of agriculture and the neglect of rural areas, and resulting to weak market power of farmers. And then insignificant involvement in policy-making processes in agriculture and rural development, and vulnerabilities in price and climate shocks threatening our livelihoods. Thus, we need to transform into sustainable food systems which are productive and prosperous, equitable and inclusive, empowering and respectful, resilient, regenerative, healthy, and nutritious. Next slide, please. The UNFSS, we believe, is an opportunity and a space to strengthen our decades-long advocacy and to explore partnerships with supportive agencies and organizations. We have identified 3 game-changing solutions. No? The first are initiatives to claim our rights as citizens and farmers and our responsibilities as residents of planet Earth. The initiatives on securing rights to lands and natural resources for men, women, and young farmers, climate resilient, integrated, diversified, organic, agroecological approaches to farms, fisheries, and forests, strengthening farmers' cooperatives and enterprises to increase family farmers' market power, and to deliver full value chain services to our members and be more strongly involved in the governance of value chains, promote equal rights and equitable opportunities for women farmers, and attract the youth to agriculture. The second set of game-changing solution is the design and implementation of national and regional action plans for the UN Decade of Family Farming 2019 to 2028 through multi-stakeholder processes with family farmers as equal partners, not only as beneficiaries and targets. And the third is to support the agency of family farmers by providing adequate longer-term direct financing, providing adequate and longer-term and direct financing to organizations of small-scale family farmers so they can engage effectively in policy work and strengthen our initiatives and partnerships, such as our current partnerships with IFAD, EU, GAPSP, FAO, and Agri, FOSE, and FFF. So thank you for your attention, and back to you, Maria.
Thank you so much, Estrella, for those important perspectives and recommendations. And as you stress, tenure rights are key. And thank you for for sharing that. I want to follow up with you. As you said, farmers are key agents, not only to produce sufficient, healthy and nutritious food. Farmers and other managers of local land and natural resources are key agents for the sustainability of food systems, the protection of ecosystems, biodiversity, as well as rehabilitation of degraded areas. From your perspective, how could these agents be better supported in this huge and complex task? And what can make it easier for them to handle these multiple goals at the same time, as they also feed their families and or produce for the market? What are your short perspective on that big question?
Yes, thank you for your relevant questions. So there will be like, what we think is that we will need appropriate, responsive, aligned, coherent policies and programs and incentives that support family farmers, plus very good support to the agency of family farmers, the organizations, the associations, and the cooperatives of family farmers, which can be the vehicle or the instrument by which to engage, for example, governments for policy, and the vehicle and instrument also to deliver services to our members so that we can have the capacity to do agroecology, to do integrated, diversified organic farming, to strengthen our cooperatives, to be involved in full value chain activities and be in equal footing, for example, with big business or private companies, be able to intelligently decide what choices we are going to make. So these two tracks of support, the policy and the program and the financing and the budget to implement that, and the capacity building, the capacity building, the support, the belief that family farmers through their organizations can manage ourselves and intelligently decide for the choices that we will make. But very basic, secured rights to lands, waters, forests, and seas. That's number one, because without land, without the forest, without access to the waters, how can we do agriculture? How can we even produce, no? And right now, these are threatened. The rights to lands, waters, and forests, and our access is very much threatened and limited by not so supportive policies or policies that are good but are not implemented in the right way.
Thank you so much, Estrella, for that strong take-home message for everyone participating in this meeting. Thank you so much for your contributions. And if you want, you can continue to discuss and answer questions in the chat. Now we will turn to the next speaker in the panel, Emil Frison, member of International Panel of Experts on Sustainable Food Systems, IPES Food. Emil is an expert on conservation and agricultural biodiversity who has headed the Global Research for Development Organization Biodiversity International for 10 years, after other top positions at global research institutes. And Emil will share perspectives on what kind of transformation of our food systems that are required to address the multiple challenges of food insecurity, health, environment, power inequalities, and obstacles to these necessary transformations. So thank you, Emil, for joining us here today, and the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you, Maria. As has already been mentioned by the previous speakers, our food system needs some radical change. It is broken. It is the #1 producer of greenhouse gases. It's polluting soil, water, air. It is destroying biodiversity. It's providing a lot of inequality in society, and etc. Next slide. And this has been very widely recognized especially in the last couple of years, where an impressive number of major international reports have come up to the conclusion that just trying to do better with our current model is not going to be sufficient. We need transformational change. We need to redesign our systems. And this is reflected in the major reports from IPCC on climate change, the IPBES report on biodiversity and ecosystem services, the high-level panel of experts on food security and nutrition, etc., etc. So we really need to rethink more basically food system policies that will address simultaneously economic, environmental, climate mitigation and adaptation, health, social and cultural objectives. And whether we start from underperforming subsistence agriculture or unsustainable industrial agriculture, we must design new systems that we've called diversified agroecological farming. Next slide. There have been a lot of work has been done to try to design and guide what this transformation should look like. FAO has adopted 10 elements of agroecology, which have been translated into 13 principles by the high-level panel of experts on food security and nutrition. And I think it is these 13 principles that can really guide us to transform our system in a way that will deliver on all of these objectives and on the sustainable development goals in an integrated way. That will require changes not only in production practices, but also changes in knowledge generation and transmission, changes in social and economic relations, and changes in the institutional framework. We have to really take this integrated approach to achieve the desired results. Next slide. Often we hear that agroecology and such approaches, it's just one tool within a toolbox, and we must use all the tools in the toolbox, including biotechnology and others. I think this is the wrong way of looking at things. Next slide. Agroecology is not just one tool in a toolbox, it's a different toolbox altogether. And it's a toolbox in which all tools and all approaches, all innovations that are compatible with the 13 principles that I just referred to. And when they are compatible, they can be integrated in these diversified agroecological systems. It is very much about a knowledge-intensive system. And so it's, we have to look at it as a different paradigm under which all the innovations that are compatible with these certain principles can be taken up in order to achieve these multiple objectives. Next slide. But you can ask the question, now that we know that, why is this not emerging more rapidly? And there are a number of lock-ins, of obstacles to transformation. And I don't have time here to go into detail. You can find much more detail in the IPES food report from industrial agriculture to diversified agroecological systems, a paradigm shift. And this will really explain why we are seeing such a relatively slow movement. I just want to highlight 2 points here. Measures of success, as long as we just keep looking at yield per hectare of major crops, major commodities, we will be stuck in a productivist model that disregards major societal objectives like good health, nutrition, equity, social development, environmental preservation, ecosystem services. So we really must start measuring those things that matter to society. And also, we must realize that in the last 10 years or so, there's been an incredible concentration of power by multinational companies that are having an integration, both vertical integration all along the food chain, but also by concentrating power within different sectors. For example, seed companies or pesticide companies or fertilizer companies, just a handful of these companies control the vast majority of the market, and they influence policies in a very significant way. So we must address all these lock-ins if we want to be able to make that transformational change. Next slide. So what is the opportunity there to move in that direction? A number of organizations, including IPES Food and others, have been working together to make a proposal to the Food System Summit for a unifying framework for food system transformation, and calling on governments, private companies, civil society to adopt these 13 principles that have been identified and developed by the high-level panel of experts on food security and nutrition. And I invite all of you to also sign a call that has been issued yesterday, and that I hope will be providing a direction for the Food System Summit. Many organizations have already decided or have already signed. We heard from UNDP. UNDP will be signing this agreement, this call very soon, as will be many major organizations that we hear from. And I will paste information about this call in the...
yes, please do that. Yes.
Yeah. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Emil, for bringing up these perspectives and these lock-ins that need more attention. I take with me Measure What Matters, and the power inequalities, of course, that needs to be addressed. So my follow-up question to you, I would like to know what are your hopes for the Food System Summit? How do you think it can contribute to the acceleration of the necessary food system transformation, which is even more urgent now as a result of the COVID crisis? A short thought on that.
Yes, there was a lot of concern at the beginning of the process on a kind of a corporate control over the Food System Summit process, and the fact that a lot of the propositions were very much based on technological fixes rather than a transformation. What has been very encouraging is that in the last few weeks, I would say, within the 5 different tracks, the idea of an agroecological has emerged. And so now there's been the creation of a cross-track working group on agroecology in order to elevate this as an important future approach to tackle the food system crisis that we are in now. And so it will not just be one of the 100 or so game-changing ideas, but very much an umbrella way forward with guidance from these 13 principles. And the ambition of this working group is to have these 13 principles adopted by the Food System Summit as a whole to guide the food system transformation that we need. And I think if that is done, it will be very encouraging. And it's very important that from the food system dialogues that are taking place, including the one that is ongoing now, that these carry the same messages, calling for this fundamental transformation, and I think taking guidance from these 13 principles. So I will paste the links into the chat box.
Yes, please share more information about this. It's very interesting to hear about the development. So now we will move on to not another speaker, but a comment, a conversation to bring this home to Sweden. How it's related to us. So I want to welcome Martin Persson, Associate Professor of Chalmers University of Technology, and also member of the Focali Research Network, to the stage. And Martin has provided guidance for the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency on indicators for environmental impact of our consumption, among many other things that could be mentioned. But I will go straight to my question for you to comment on. Welcome, Martin.
Thank you very much.
So, Martin, how is the challenge that we've heard of with the global food system linked to us in Sweden? And if you focus in particular, how are we connected to the global food system via our consumption? Can you give some examples of this?
Yes, I mean, as has already been clear from the presentations we've heard, I mean, this is very much a global food system in which we are connected in a multitude of ways. And one way, an example you see here is in the figure on the left is Swedish imports of agricultural commodities linked to tropical deforestation. So as Ulrika Moder brought up in her introductory speech, tropical deforestation is one of the key sources of greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture, global food systems. It's also a prime driver of biodiversity loss. And Sweden is contributing to this, although we're far from the tropics, by our imports of key forestry commodities like beef, oilseeds like soy from Latin America, palm oil from Southeast Asia, and so on, but also cereals and forestry products and so on. But of course, it's not restricted. What you see here are estimates of the carbon emissions that are resulting from this deforestation, but there are also impacts on biodiversity, of course. And it's not only about deforestation. Sweden is a small country, and we're relying on food imports to meet our food demands, and that has impact also in terms of colleagues that looked at pesticide use, which is much higher outside of Sweden than internally. There are water impacts, livelihood impacts, and so on. But we should also, of course, remember that not all impacts are negative. There are also positive impacts, of course, of Swedish imports supporting livelihoods and so on in tropical countries and other places. Yes,
thank you. That was a snapshot on different impacts, so that we see that we are connected, of course. So based on your research and work on this, what do you see are the key areas of improvements for us to reduce the negative impacts? If you summarize a few issues.
Yeah, I mean, again, going back to there are positive and negative impacts. So really what we want to do is not disconnect ourselves from the world, but we want to sort of minimize the negative impact we have and maximize the positive impact. And I think, and this has also come up in the presentations we heard so far, there's not one solution for this. There is no silver bullet. We need to think in different ways, and we need to work on the production side. I mean, the previous two presentations, Estrella Penunia's emphasis on supporting smallholders and family farmers and so on. I think Sweden can play an important role there, and other countries in supporting a transition to sustainable production, forest protection as well in tropical countries. A lot of emphasis in recent years has been on sort of sustainable value chains or supply chains, and there are steps being taken here by the EU, for example. It's going to come with legislative proposals in July, and one of the things that's up on the table is mandatory due diligence for importing countries. And again, I think important here is to emphasize the sort of collaboration and including stakeholders, including small family farms and so on. This. And then we can, of course, also work when we need to work, I think, about at home, thinking about ways to reduce waste and therefore reduce demand for land, which is ultimately what is driving deforestation, for example. We need to pay more in order to get sustainable production.
Thank you so much, Martin. And you can also paste more information in the chat. I know that you have that you're teaching, so you are running off and not answering questions, but you can paste more information. And thank you so much. This is also questions that all participants can reflect on, because the link to Sweden, both positive and negative, how we are related to the food system and what we can do to contribute to a more positive direction will be discussed in the group workshop. So take that opportunity to reflect on these issues in the groups and provide input. Thank you so much, Martin. So now we have looked at some of the challenges with the current global food system and briefly also touched at least on the role of us in Sweden. And now I will hand over to my co-moderator, Anneli, that will take you out in the world to listen to different examples of more sustainable practices and perspectives that we could learn from. So welcome, Anneli, and the second panel.
Thank you very much. My name is Anneli Sundin, and I work with communication and engagement in the Sida funded program, Agriculture for Food Security, with a consortium here in Sweden, but we work with partners in Sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia and Southeast Asia on translating science to policy and practice on sustainable agriculture. And we are thrilled to have another 3 eminent speakers with us here today in a panel that will focus, as Maria said, on sustainable practice around the world. What we've heard was mentioned in the first panel, we will now get to see examples of. So we have with us Million Belay, who is the coordinator of the Alliance of Food Sovereignty in Africa, AFSA. He has been working for over 2 decades on intergenerational learning in biocultural diversity, sustainable agriculture, as well as the rights of local communities. We also have with us today Amy Ikowitz, who is a senior scientist at the Center for International Forestry Research, CIFOR, in Bogor, Indonesia, where she leads the Sustainable Landscapes and Livelihoods team. And she's currently focusing on impacts of landscape change on food security and nutrition. Last but not least, we have also Richard Bemaronda, who works at an environmental civil society organization called Kanko in Kenya. He's the program manager there of the Marine Ecosystem and Fisheries Program. The goal of this program is to ensure conservation, rehabilitation, and sustainable management of coastal and marine resources, including mangroves and fisheries, which I think we will be hearing more of. So without further ado, I welcome you all, and we'll turn first to Million, who I think has a couple of images that he would like to show to the audience. Please, hi, Million.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm coming from the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa, the biggest civil society movement in Africa. We have pastoralists, fisher folks, farmers, indigenous peoples networks, women networks, youth networks, faith-based institutions. It's a broad-based. As we are talking in the context of the United Nations Food System Summit, we have sent a letter to the special envoy, to Madam Agnes Kalibata. I just want to summarize, the 3 main points that is included in the letter, which I have already attached in the chat, and go and talk about the figure here. As you know, the civil society is deeply disappointed with the whole process of the UNFSS. It feels very much ignored. We have no idea how these 5 tracks, for example, were set up, who set up the whole structure of the meeting, and why it was taken out of the Committee for Food Security under UNFAO and taken to the UN. So the first question from AFSA was the institutionalization process, and why it was in the UN, and why is it led by somebody like Agnes Kalibata. And the fear is that there is still corporate control of the whole process. And we want, one of the demand in that letter is we want a complete participation of the civil society through the committee, the system, the Commission for, there's a CSO group under the FAO, the civil society mechanism. So we want participation, we want a track to be created and led by the civil society mechanism. The second is, in terms of knowledge which is used to construct the outcome of this UNFSS, where we know that there is a scientific committee organized and working, but we hear that it's dominated by natural scientists, and social scientists are not given much of a space, only economists, and indigenous knowledge and knowledge of local communities is not included. So it has to be included. That's one of the content of the letter.
Thank you, Million. Just make sure to have some time to talk about your images as well.
Thank you. The final one, which is related to this, the diagram in front of me, is agroecology. Agroecology should be included, and should be included in the co-opted way, as Emil was emphasizing. It has to be central, and the certain principles should be there. So the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa, before we decided to work on agroecology, to have agroecology as a purpose, we did a lot of research, a lot of case studies. As you can see this diagram, case studies on land, on seed, on pastoralism, and on so many of agroecological practices. And we published these case studies, and you can find them on our website. And I'm going to talk for 1 minute now in the second slide. Yes, this is a very interesting experience, interesting practice. Even this practice started before the name of agroecology was popularized, not coined. It was coined a long time ago, but the name popularized. And the research was done in the northern part of Ethiopia, Tigray, and it was done over 2 decades. And as you can see, these are the 5 crops that you can see here are very critical to Ethiopian food system: barley, durum wheat, maize, teff, and fava bean. So the experiment was done with the participation of farmers, and some of the farmers decided not to apply any kind of input, either a natural fertilizer in the name of compost or a chemical fertilizer. And some of them have agreed to apply chemical fertilizer, and some of them have followed 3 strategies, increase plant biomass of the landscape and doing soil and water conservation, and from the plant biomass that they have raised to do compost. So the 3 areas were, treated with one with chemical fertilizers, one with compost, and the other with nothing. And as you can see, the land treated by fertilizers, by chemical fertilizers was good from the beginning, but it was overtaken by the land treated by compost. As you can see, the blue diagram. And not applying any compost was not an option. So we can see from this diagram that yes, it's possible to increase productivity, increase diversity, protect the environment through agroecology. Thank you. Sorry to take so much time.
No, thank you, Miljan. That's a very interesting slide that you're showing there. And I have a follow-up question for you.
Yes.
How can you say something quickly about how the farmers were involved in this study, and how did they relate to these results? Historically and still today, many small-scale farmers, they use conventional farming methods, including the use of chemical fertilizers. So how was it for the farmers to switch to this compost-based system rather than using chemical fertilizers? What do you think is key in order for a farmer to make that switch?
Okay, to begin with, so many farmers in Africa are still not using chemical fertilizers because it's very expensive to begin with, and sometimes even if they want to do it, they don't have enough of it. But you are asking a very, very critical questions. These are basically, some of them have switched. Switching is a very, very dangerous and not a preferred option for farmers, because the land which was treated for so many years by chemical fertilizers is very difficult to switch in 1 year or in 2 years. It takes time for to build up the soil. You see, in countries like Germany, I know that the government, even in Sweden, they have started, because I visited a farmer. The farmers are supported if they want to switch from chemical fertilizer to organic or agroecological ways of living or ways of farming, but that option is very much limited in African countries. So transformation to agroecology can be costly to farmers. That's why we need all the money that's coming to Africa should be dedicated and allocated to this kind of transformation for all those critical reasons.
Thank you, Miljan. I think you're getting questions in the chat, so check that out and see if you can answer some of those. We'll have to turn to the next panel speaker. Amy, would you like to talk about your images?
Yes, thank you so much.
Yes.
So I'm going to be giving some examples of nature positive solutions of food systems that are now, though, changing in some ways into nature negative ones, even as we're trying to find new solutions. Next slide, please. Thank you. So you see in this slide a number of images from communities in West Kalimantan, Indonesia, on the island of Borneo, showing elements of traditional local food systems. These are Dayak communities where people traditionally practice swidden cultivation. So on the bottom left, you can see Ibu Heni is harvesting some beans from her swidden field. She normally goes to the field in the morning, but on a few days in the week, she goes to the forest with her friends, who you can see in the upper right corner. And they harvest mushrooms, forest fruits, ferns, which you can see in the bottom middle panel, which are very nutritious. And they also harvest fish or other aquatic animals, which you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, some mollusks that they collected from the river. And some of the males in their households also hunt, but we don't have any images of that. But overall, they have various food groups that they get from their local food systems. They have the carbohydrates from the rice and maize that they grow, complemented by fruits, vegetables, meat, fish, which they harvest. Next slide, please. So many communities in this district have signed agreements with palm oil companies and have converted vast tracts of land into oil palm plantations, which we heard mentioned when we talked about that trade between Sweden and many countries. And you can see here what this looks like in the landscape. Next slide, please. Here are some images from the other side of the vast archipelago of Indonesia, from Papua, where traditional lifestyles rely on hunting, fishing, and harvesting of sago, which you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, the traditional main staple food in the bottom left. And similar changes are happening in these landscapes as well, and to diets in these landscapes, as are happening in Kalimantan. If you look at the landscape on the right, it looks very similar to the image that I showed you on the slide before. So C4 and partners have been studying how these changes affect diets of women and children by comparing diets in traditional and oil palm households. And we have found that there have been dietary gains and losses. In general, there seem to be declines in fish, fruit, and vegetable consumption, all very important nutrient-rich foods, but there have been gains in egg and milk consumption, which are also nutrient-rich foods. On the other hand, there's also more unhealthy food consumption in oil palm households, mostly in the form of sweets and highly processed foods. So we see that nature-positive food systems are changing with the adoption of oil palm. Overall, households seem to be getting wealthier with oil palm. And there's a lot of controversy even within communities about these changes. The decisions are very complex, but from a food security and diet perspective, the development argument is that when people specialize and adopt modern agriculture, in this case, oil palm, they're going to be earning higher incomes and buying healthy foods. But this ignores what happens to the land, as we've heard from some of the other speakers. But also, they don't always buy healthy foods. Many of the healthy foods that they were eating before also don't get replaced, and some get replaced by less healthy foods. On the other hand, there are really some healthy foods. So it's a very complex picture. And as we're discussing nature-positive solutions here, there are some things that we can learn from traditional systems that are nature-positive in many ways. But yet still many people are moving away from them. So how do we retain the elements of nature-positive food systems where they exist and meet people's aspirations for better lives? And so I'm looking forward to discussions today where we try to answer those questions together. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That is very fascinating and lots of food for thought there. I have one follow-up question that came to my mind, Amy. What kinds of actions do you think could be taken to support these indigenous and traditional food and food systems? What's your take on that?
Thanks a lot for that question. I think there are many actions that can be taken at various levels. So particularly at the national level, which I think is very important, there needs to be greater valuing of these food systems and these foods in national discourses. And so you can see when you have focus group discussions and talk to people that people are concerned, elderly people in particular are concerned, but middle-aged people as well, that these foods are being their children are moving away from these foods because they're not really valued in social cultural discourse. So I think social marketing campaigns are important for young people, but also to give pride to people and for people outside of these communities to respect these foods and to learn from them as well. But also, there are government policies that actually actively discourage some of these practices with, I think, many of them with good intentions. So I'm not talking about oil palm in this case, but there's, for example, a program in Indonesia that subsidizes rice consumption because rice is considered the national staple food. And it is more or less traditional in some islands, but that discourages people from eating sago, their traditional food, which is also healthier in many ways in terms of diabetes prevention, for example. So perhaps the government could be less focused on what foods they subsidize and subsidize staple foods that are more locally appropriate in different contexts. And so just one last point that I think is important for today's talk. If there's more understanding of the contributions that landscapes make to people's diets across sectors, the forestry sector, for example, if it were clear that these forests are actually providing healthy foods to people and improving food security and nutrition, there'd be less scope for national discourse that although we love forests, we have to sacrifice them for food security because we need to grow more rice, or in this case, more oil palm. The trade-offs about what foods we would be losing from making those kinds of decisions, I think, would be more transparent to everybody.
Thank you, Amy. Those were excellent points, and I hope the audience can bring those with them when they go into the workshop part. Thank you. We will now turn to Richard in Kenya, where he will talk and show us photos of mangroves, I think. Not so commonly debated in the mainstream discourse. We're very glad that you're here, Richard. Go ahead.
Hello, and very good morning from Mombasa, Kenya. I'm Richard Bemaronda, working for Community Action for Nature Conservation as a program manager. From the photos indicated there, we are looking at issues to do with mangrove degradation. And before I talk into the mangrove degradation, this program involves working with local communities, particularly the fishermen, women fish traders, and women fishers, because historically we know that fisheries and fishing has been a docket which is male dominated, but we are trying to reverse this situation to see that the fisheries sector or the fisheries subsector includes women to be fully participants into that sector. And the photo you see above there is regarding the destruction of the mangroves in Kenya. And we see the effect of mangrove because mangroves and fisheries is one and the same. And majority of the local population in Kenya, particularly within the coastal strip, depend on the fisheries resources for livelihood. And therefore, if we destroy the mangroves, it's more or less like destroying the life of the local communities. And therefore, for us as an organization, we are looking forward to making sure that the communities along the Kenyan coast appreciate and participate into the areas that will improve in terms of the food security to the local population. Next slide, please. Hello. Yeah, we are saying that we are working with the local population to making sure that we reverse the situation. And this regards, we believe that mangroves are a key component in terms of curbing the climate change. And besides the climate change, we know that mangroves provide food in relation to fisheries, including the productivity of crabs, the regular crabs, and the non-fish products such as animal fish, particularly during the dry season that we know the Avicennia marina local population use it to feed their animals. And again, within the fisheries subsector, we know that small-scale fisheries is very important in terms of the food security to the locals. And if we combine the mangroves and seascapes, we know that they're very, very important ecosystems for fish and other marine species. And this means food for the local population along the Kenyan coast. In this regards, therefore, it is very crucial and important to making sure that we conserve and restore the mangroves, because we believe that the moment you start restoring or you are conserving to restore the promise of the sea. And this promise of the sea is in terms of the food production to the local population in Kenya. Next slide.
It's on, the next slide is on.
Yeah,
good.
As you can see, that's the mangrove mud crab, which is the Celecerata species, which is commonly found within the mangroves. And therefore, if indeed we manage to restore and conserve the mangroves, it means that we will have abundance of food security with regards to the crabs, the fish, as we believe that fish is very nutritious to our bodies, and therefore we need to keenly making sure that we support the productivity of these marine ecosystems along the Kenyan coast so that we can conserve the lives and the livelihoods of the local population. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. That was a very concrete example from coastal landscapes. You talked a little bit, or quite a bit, about the benefits to these local communities when you're restoring these landscapes. So can you tell us something about what the challenges are for these communities to engage in this restoration process? Do they experience barriers to take part in the restoration? If you can elaborate a bit on that, would be great.
Yeah, the local population along the Kenyan coast is very devoted to making sure that they participate and be part and parcel to the restoration processes. But however, there are quite a number of challenges, ranging that in mangrove restoration and fisheries in general, mostly is men dominated, and therefore the gender parity is observed, and women looked as offenders into these processes. So through this initiative, we are making sure that women be part and parcel to these processes. Again, the other challenge is about the capacity and knowledge of the local communities into participating into like a mangrove restoration, because we believe that mangrove restoration needs and requires some kind of a scientific approach in terms of the site identification and the general ecology and biology of this mangrove. And then the other challenge is about the scarcity of the propagules or the seeds, which contribute into making the communities not fully participate into the restoration process. Again, the other challenge is people need to devote time. But again, if you devote time towards conservation, again, you need to consider your livelihood. So there is some kind of limitation in terms of the livelihood options for the local community so that they can fully devote their time into taking part into conserving the local resources. And then it leads into fatigue, because if you work, and mostly these initiatives are voluntarily, so they need some kind of livelihood options for them to fully participate into these local initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And thank you all three panelists for these examples of sustainable practices and agroecology on the ground. We have actually a few spare minutes before we go into the workshop part. So I would like to turn to all three, if all three panelists could be spotlighted, and ask, with these examples as a backdrop now, what do you think are the key ingredients to ensure we boost food production with practices that are nature positive? What is needed for some practices and actions to scale up, and how can we scale up faster? Anyone wants to take on this big question with some ideas, some food for thoughts that the audience can bring into the workshop? I don't Do we have Amy or Million or Richard? Don't be shy.
Sorry, I didn't get you, Anand.
So I wonder, what are the key ingredients to ensure we boost food production with practices that are nature positive? What do we need to scale up? And how can we scale up faster? We have a couple of minutes.
I can come in quickly.
Yes, Million, please.
I think most of the time, you know, when because we are talking about this issue now with a very successful project in India, and we are exploring how they could bring more than 600,000 farmers into agroecological product. And what they say is work on the social side of it. It's very, very critical to work on the social side of it. So they had these women groups, women self-help groups, thousands of them, previously organized very well. So they have worked through this women social group, and they've introduced some of these practices, which they call community managed natural fertilization, and the people started to congregate around these practices, and it has to spread, and the practice has to rise. So the social side is very much important.
Excellent point. Thank you, Million. Amy, do you have any point to bring up here? Some last key point?
The wisdom.
Last words of wisdom.
I don't really think I have words of wisdom, but I could share some thoughts. I think that we need to seek some kind of blend. I mean, we heard from the early speakers and from speakers in this panel of things that farmers are already doing. And in some cases, farmers, in some cases, hunters and collectors. So, and as Million was talking about in his presentation as well, that there are traditional indigenous practices that are very nature positive, but we make these, and at the same time, there are practices that are not, and there's modern agriculture that's eroded a lot of those practices, in part, like to make some of the connections from other speakers, in part for the desire for cheap food that comes from outside of those countries and inside of those countries. Yeah. And it's important also for people to have affordable food. But I think we need to, so there are those practices, and then the movement of agroecology, I think, is a really important movement to correct some of the problems caused by modern agriculture. But I think we should also still appreciate that there are traditional practices that are agroecological and maybe superior to some agroecological practices that are coming from outside. So I think we have to be, this is just maybe food for thought rather than solutions, but I think we need to be sensitive to knowledge that's already there, and to think that a lot of these answers will come from outside. But there are improvements that can be made, like the people in the communities that I showed, they want higher incomes. And if they stay with their traditional practices, those higher incomes are unlikely to come without support.
Thank you, Amy. I think maybe very, very brief, if you have something, Richard, we have to move on very soon. I see there are also more questions for you in the chat, so please turn to the chat later. But Richard, do you have one last point?
Yeah, very quickly. I think for us to do the scaling up, we need to consider better fisheries value chains and access to fisheries products, especially for the local communities. And finally, we need also to consider like payment for sustainable local initiatives so that people can feel part and parcel to the food processors.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Richard, and thank you all panelists for your insights. I'm now quickly handing over to Maria again, who will talk about the next part of this event.
Yes, thank you so much, my co-moderator Anneli, and all the excellent speakers in this panel. It has been so interesting to hear from these cases, and do please share more in the chat, and we look forward to hear more from you another time as well. So now it's time for the closing remark and the reflection on this entire series of Sweden's global dialogues ahead of the Food System Summit. And this task will be done by Esse Nilsson, and she's a senior policy specialist for agriculture and food security at the Sida Policy Support Unit. She has worked previously for a long time also with Sida as a policy advisor for poverty and poverty analysis, and as a program manager for regional water resources in the MENA region. And she holds a master in rural social development from the University of Reading in the UK. She also has a strong interest to learn more within the field she works, and also practice organic gardening, and is currently studying for another master in economic history, and very timely, with a focus on global food systems. And with those words, I hand over to you, Esse. Welcome to wrap up this dialogue series.
Well, thank you very
happy
much.
to have you here.
Yes, thank you very much, Maria. And really, I mean, in short terms, I'm a global social worker. I told you that last night, Maria. And I'm very happy to be that too. Dear friends and colleagues, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for participating in our roundtable dialogues, and for all your thoughts and contributions. I am grateful. This is the final of 3 roundtable dialogues with international perspectives that we, Sida, together with the Ministry for Enterprise and Innovation, the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, and with SIANI for Cali, SLU Global, have hosted as part of the Swedish National Food System Dialogues. Colleagues at SIANI, I am so impressed how you, with ridiculously short notice, have managed to pull together 3 very well organized events. But thank you really to all for adding such rich knowledge and ideas as for how we can better global food systems, so that we together can reverse the ongoing and worrying trend of poverty, hunger, and malnutrition. And in 2030, instead talk about global, sufficient and healthy food systems, the realization of the right to food, to peace and well-being for all people in the world. I share this dream with many. It is our joint mission to make this a reality in the next 9 years. The forthcoming UN Food Systems Summit can help and will help, but it will be the beginning, the starting point only. The real change will happen afterwards, with actions, with resources, with a real agenda towards transforming global food systems. This also goes for Sida. We will have to do more, and we will have to do it better than ever before. A colleague at Sida said recently that perhaps all Sida contributions should be assessed on the basis of food security, as hunger indeed is the closest we get to absolute poverty. Many of you here today are partners of Sida, implementing partners. And I would like to point out that it is only together with our partners that we can support and realize good change, such as the right to food. Thank you for working with us for the goal on zero hunger. Solving global problems always starts with dialogues. It can happen in a closed space, or in an invited space, or even better, in an open space. The Food System National Dialogues held in each country in the world, as encouraged by the organizer, have demonstrated all kinds of spaces and levels of participation. In addition to this, we have ongoing food system expert and champion groups, the food system action tracks, followed by the food system pre-meeting in Rome in July, and the final food system summit in New York in September. It is a joint journey. Are we all invited, you may wonder, and what kind of participation space will that be? I don't have an answer to all that, but I am certain that we have contributed through these dialogues, and that these dialogues also have given us opportunity of finding new contacts between ourselves, ideas and action points that will generate new initiatives to improve food systems. As I said, we are only beginning, more joint work ahead. We're in this world to collaborate. We can only sustain life, nature, and sustainable and just food production if we work together in solidarity and not alone. With a shared responsibility, we can and we will transform global food systems to become economically and socially fair, while caring towards the environment and boosting nature-positive production. This means that we will win. We win a future world with food security and zero hunger for all. So thank you again for being at center stage of these roundtable dialogues. Thank you for your engagement and your action points. Your voices will remain valuable. So until next time, thank you. And over to Maria.
Thank you so much, Esse, for those important words. Of course, we have tried to facilitate participation here, but we look forward to continued interactions as well. And thank you all for participating. And please also stay tuned for the notes and videos that will be shared on the SIANI homepage. This afternoon, you will also receive a survey, all that have participated, and there will also be opportunity in the survey to include even more points if you felt that you had more to say that you did not have the time to share. And my colleague Jonathan, who has also been coordinating these dialogues from SIANI, he will also put the email address to the government input box for the Food System Summit if you want to reach directly to the Swedish government office's preparations. There is the inbox, so you can send any input and perspective that you want there. But finally, I am so grateful for everything that has been shared in this exchange, and thank you all speakers, facilitators, note takers, tech support, everyone that has been involved in this. So thank you, and we hope to interact again. You can sign up also on the Focali and SIANI homepages for more of our dialogues. And yes, we will look forward to connect with you. Thank you so much.